Hello, hello. I'm back again with my second Gabbie Hanna video. Now, a lot has happened between my first one and this one now, and I'm not going to talk about all of it at all. To summarize, it's a lot. And if you want to know about anything specific, I would recommend Spill Sesh, T-Spill, channels like that. But I did want to give my opinions on this BuzzFeed article that came out recently. It's titled, "Why is everyone so mad at Gabbie Hanna?" And it's completely free to read. I just Googled the name of the article and then put BuzzFeed article after that and it popped right up. I read about half of it and I just had to stop. It's a long article, first off, and second off, I don't usually read articles like this, but I know that Gabbie's been a hot topic of conversation. A lot has happened, so I was very curious about this one, and a lot of the commentary channels that I watch have been talking about it, so I just kind of wanted to read it for myself, and then I read until I couldn't handle it anymore. I do have leftover magnetic eyeliner on my eyelids. I did my normal face washing and I tried to use the micellar cleanser directly on them, but magnetic liner just does not like to be removed at all. Said, no, I'm here to stay, I'm moving in, ain't gonna pay rent though, so there's that. So anyway, I have some notes that I wanted to talk about with the article, so let's just jump right into it. So the very first part of the article, it starts talking about the interviewer, who is Scotchy Cowell. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, sorry, but she was the BuzzFeed News reporter that interviewed Gabbie. So she starts off the article by talking about how she got to Gabbie's mansion, rang the doorbell. No one came to greet her. Peyton, Gabbie's boyfriend, he rang out over the intercom. He just said the door's open. So she just opened the door, and no one was there to greet her. She had to wander through Gabbie's mansion trying to find her, and eventually she did find Gabbie in her bedroom, which is on the second story of her mansion, and Gabbie was surrounded by a team of people, her publicist, the makeup artist, and the photographer's assistant, and they were basically forming like a human shield around her, is the vibe that I got from this first part. And first of all, you knew this lady was coming because she was getting her makeup done for the interview and everything. And you have to schedule interviews, obviously. So why would you be rude and not go and greet her? And yeah, okay, she's still getting her makeup done for it, fine. Peyton obviously knew about the interview. Why did he just buzz over the intercom like, oh, hey, door's open? Why didn't he wander on over to the front door to let the reporter in and bring her to who she was interviewing, or just have her wait in the living room like, oh, Gabbie's just getting her makeup done, she'll be a few minutes. Peyton and Gabbie were both extremely rude from the get-go, in my opinion. You don't have to say rude things to be a rude person. Their actions with not greeting the reporter were rude enough for me, because I would never even think to do something like that. First off, with my anxiety, if I know that I would have something big coming up, such as like an interview for BuzzFeed, I would have gotten ready 3 hours before the reporter would be saying she'd be arriving, and I'd be in waiting mode. So I'd pretty much just be sitting in the living room or whichever room is by the front door, and I would pretty much just be waiting for hours for the woman or whoever was going to show up. Because that's just how I am. Now, obviously, not everyone's like that, but it is very rude, in my opinion, to just have her walk through a mansion trying to find the person that she was interviewing. Like, my house isn't that big. It's about 1,200 square feet, if I'm remembering correctly, and I would still not expect someone to just come find me where I am. That's horrible. Unless it was someone who's been in my house before, like a best friend or a relative. Rude. All right. And then, once the reporter found Gabbie, Gabbie turned to the reporter as well as everyone else and said, and I quote, "Okay, this is a question for the room. What's your most embarrassing moment?" So she was expecting everyone that was there. I don't know if she was included in that. I don't think it said in the article if Gabbie talked about her own most embarrassing moment or not, but just to ask a question like that, that's not an icebreaker. That's weird, in my opinion. And it says, even though she hadn't met any of us before, including her new publicist, they had to answer the question pretty much. Gabbie basically forced them to answer, what is your most embarrassing moment? Now, to divulge information without being prompted is one thing. I don't know why I do this, but I tend to trauma dump on people who I know have been through stuff themselves, and people that I just kind of hit it off with right away. So, but it's another thing entirely to straight up ask someone for that information. Even therapists, psychiatrists, they won't, or they shouldn't just straight up ask questions like this. It's all about, if you want to divulge that information, go for it. If not, fine. Like, you could schedule a therapy appointment and just sit there for the whole time that you're paying for. They don't care. You're paying for that time. They're not just gonna sit and be like, okay, so let's talk. In your very first session, you sit down with a psychiatrist. They're never gonna be like, all right, what's your trauma? They shouldn't say that, by the way. If you go to a psychiatrist who straight up asks you, day one, what's your trauma? Run. You can find somebody better, trust me. But yeah, it's one thing to just divulge that information yourself without being prompted. It's a whole nother thing to ask somebody, especially a stranger, for that information. Even when I'm telling people, like, okay, this is the trauma that I went through, I do not expect whoever I'm talking to respond to me with their own trauma, or even stuff that's not traumatic, but very personal. I would never expect somebody to say that stuff to me. And this was pretty much her first interaction with the reporter. And her whole team of people that she had just circling her. That's not okay. And it also says in this bit that Gabbie's publicist would at no point during the day allow her to speak to Gabbie Hanna alone. Now this, I don't really have an opinion on. I've never had a publicist. This seems pretty par for the course for it, though. So I have no experience with this, but I feel like if I were a publicist myself, and especially if I represented a controversial person, I would probably not allow a reporter to speak to my client alone. I don't know. But then the article goes ahead to talk about Gabbie's various controversies throughout her career, starting with the video she made about a classmate in the 7th grade who passed away from an overdose, I think it was, and talking about the Kenza Cosmetics makeup brushes, and then the big one with Jessie Smiles. So it just kind of lists those controversies. And then a direct quote from Gabbie again says, "Who didn't I apologize to? I gave Jessie Smiles an apology. I gave Beyonce an apology. It feels like I'm always dishing out apologies, and I've never once received one, and that, to me, feels a little chaotic." End quote. So that, according to the article, is directly from Gabbie Hanna's mouth. Okay. I agree that yes, she should have apologized to all those people. She did make a video where she titled it the names of all the people that she talked about, like Alex James, Beyonce, Jessie. And she had apologized to various people in that video. Like, okay, you should have. Like, if you don't want to apologize for the things that you've done, don't do shitty things. That seems obvious to me. And then she says, I've never received an apology, and that to me feels a little chaotic. What should she receive an apology for? To me, the only thing that comes to mind is when Rice Gum broke her phone. I don't know if he ever apologized to her for that, but that's the only thing that really comes to mind. It's like, if you're the one who's constantly making comments about people, getting into other controversies, like the big stuff with Jessie Smiles, stuff like that, why should they have to apologize to you at all? They shouldn't, first of all, because all that stuff is your problem, your fault. So it seems like with that quote, she was trying definitely to make herself the victim, which is par for the course for Gabbie. That is something time and time again that I've noticed. And back when I was a huge fan of hers, I believed it. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I thought she was the victim in everything. And I myself, when I was 18 through 22-ish, I had that same mentality. And I would try to spin everything to make myself the victim. And occasionally I do still fall into that, but I am aware that it's bad. And as a 25-year-old, I try not to do that anymore. And I realized that when I did do that, that was a toxic trait that I had. And Gabbie is 30, and she still is believing this victim mentality that she has about herself. That's not okay. And this is totally off topic, but I am so curious as to what Peyton is like in his everyday life. But that's beside the point, and it's none of my business, of course. And another direct quote from Gabbie says, I honestly just want to be left alone, but they just can't resist. Talking about people, like, talking about her controversies and everything. If you did something bad and apologized for it and showed changed behavior, then if people keep bringing it up, to go along with that, change behavior and people forgave you, and then they keep bringing it up, that's bad on them. But first, they don't have to forgive you if you apologize. That's the tea. That's something that a lot of people forget. If you apologize for something, the people that you're apologizing to do not have to forgive you. And a lot of people don't seem to realize this. Like when all this stuff with Jeffree Star was happening, and before the big stuff that came out this year or last year or whatever, when people would still be like, or right after his Shane series, people would be like, oh, don't you know he's racist and all that stuff. Then all of his stans would come along and be like, he apologized for that? It's like, sure, he did, but no one has to forgive him. So, yeah. But going back to my original point, she may have apologized for the stuff that she's done, but she has not changed her behavior, Gabbie Hanna. She has not, in my opinion. So, to me, that's not bringing up old stuff that's dead and buried. That is pointing out a pattern, because it's a pattern. She's still doing stuff, horrible stuff to people. This isn't all stuff that happened 6 years ago or whatever, and we're just re-talking about it because she stepped on someone's foot or something. No, she's still doing horrible things. So pointing out her past stuff along with the horrible things that she's still doing, that's just showing you, hey, she has a history of doing this stuff. This is not a one-off. This is the type of person who you need to watch out for because of this, 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 and this. So, to me, this quote, again, they just can't resist. This is another victim mentality that she's built up in her head. All right, and then the article next says, Hanna hasn't been able to bounce back after an apology video or time off social media, perhaps because a sizable chunk of her audience is absolutely not buying that she's sorry for anything. And yeah, everything that I just said about it, her still continuing to do crappy things. Nobody's buying it, at least nobody should be buying it. And if you are, I urge you to wake up, because she's not, she might have tricked herself into thinking that she's sorry, but she's not. And I don't even think she has tricked herself into thinking that she's sorry. I don't think she is sorry, because she doesn't think that she was the one at fault. The only reason she has apologized for anything is so that she can say that she's apologized for it. She's not actually mournful of what she did. She doesn't regret what she did, in my opinion. And then, of course, Gabbie steers the conversation to saying that male counterparts who have done crappy things have been forgiven for what they've done, but she hasn't, because she's a woman. It says here, the allegations levied against Hanna not worse than those of any of her often male counterparts. She's a manipulative asshole? Take a number. She's insincere. Who isn't? Now this chunk here, like, just throwing it often male, like, okay. There are definitely instances where the general public has forgiven people for stuff that they really shouldn't have. I don't know if this is a gender issue or what. Either way, the fact she's bringing up this stuff, I can't remember what logical fallacy this is, but she's doing it, where she's bringing up, like, oh, well, this person is an asshole and the public loves him. This person is insincere and everybody loves him. No, sis, this isn't about them. This is about you, okay? Like, yeah, it's wrong that people will just forgive and forget for a different person when their behavior hasn't changed. But that doesn't make it okay for you. And it shouldn't be okay for them, but it definitely doesn't make it okay for you, all right? Like, let's be held accountable for our actions, all right? And then it says, Logan Paul, who recorded a dead body in a forest in 2017, said he was sorry, and now he makes $150,000 for one Facebook post. Now that is like taking a story, telling you the very beginning, and then telling you the very end. There's a whole chunk of stuff that happened between 2017 and 2021 that is obviously not being mentioned here, because if that stuff was mentioned, it wouldn't help Gabbie's argument at all. And I hope people are realizing this. Logan Paul didn't do that one thing, apologize for it, and now he's the country's favorite. First off, a lot of people still dislike both of the Paul brothers. Logan, he did do crappy stuff, and he did apologize for it, and then he changed his behavior. That's the part that isn't in this article. He didn't apologize and still keep doing stuff, and now all of a sudden he's making a bunch of money for a social media post. He did a lot of work in between that, and a lot of people still don't like him for that stuff, and that's fine. That everybody's entitled to their opinion. But in my opinion, Logan Paul, not his brother, but Logan, has worked really hard to change his image, to change his behavior, and he's pretty successful now, and he earned that. Gabbie has done none of those things. None of them. But of course, she's going to use the beginning of Logan's story and the very end of Logan's story to try to fit her narrative. And then the article goes on to talk about how much she is obsessed with Freddie Mercury, and she specifically admires his I don't give a shit attitude. And then there's a direct quote, I like looking up interviews where he's telling people off. All right, so she's taking an icon that she is obsessed with, which, you know, people tend to do, And she's basically trying to copy his behavior. And then when she's called out for it, this is all my opinion, she's saying, well, Freddie Mercury did it. Why do you hate me so much? He did it. She's trying, in my opinion, to copy and paste controversies of her idols or the way that they acted or their attitudes. And when the public doesn't favor Gabbie the way that they favored Freddie Mercury, she blames it on, oh, she's a woman, or other things like that. Like, no, honey, you're not Freddie Mercury. You're never gonna be Freddie Mercury. Stop trying to justify your horrible behavior with... It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. It doesn't make any sense. And she's, yet again, trying to use stuff like this to fit her narrative. And something that I wanted to bring up that isn't in this article, at least as far as I know, is right before Alanis Morissette came out with her song You Ought to Know, she had kind of a public mental breakdown. I didn't actually look up what she did at all, but this is what people, after Gabbie's cover came out, were saying about Alanis, and they were making comparisons like, oh, she did this before she came out with You Ought to Know, and Gabbie did the same thing. So it seems to me that Gabbie is trying to replicate exactly what her idols did, but because it's not genuine, people aren't buying it. And because people aren't buying it, in my opinion, Gabbie is thinking that it's just because people are biased against her. People are biased against you for a reason. For reasons. You need to look inward into yourself before you go out and try to do all this stuff and then get mad when people don't react the way that you want them to. You're not doing what you're trying to do, Gabbie. You're just furthering people's negative opinion about you. Sorry, but it's true. So I was going to talk about more, and obviously I've barely gone into the article, but I'm going to end it here. So this is part one of me talking about the why is everyone so mad at Gabbie Hanna BuzzFeed article. I don't know if I'll make a part two, but there's that. Please let me know if you agree with anything of what I said. If you disagree, why? Please like this video. Yeah, that's about it for that. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, you guys.